So, hi everyone. This is new for us. We have not done a webinar. So if someone doesn't mind putting in the chat that they can hear me, I would appreciate it. It's definitely a little hard to speak into the void like this. Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone. It's good to see you all out there, kind of, in the chat. My name is Julie Camerata. I work for the DC Special Education Cooperative. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. I know some of you may have started your post-school break or whatever, time is a circle at this point. So wherever you are in your schedule, thank you so much for making time for joining us today. Monica, would you advance the slide? I think many of you know the co-op, but just in case there are some of you who don't, we are a nonprofit organization that was founded by charter school leaders at the very beginning of the charter movement here in DC. I think that makes us kind of special because it was the schools themselves that decided they wanted an organization like this to support them in all things special education. As it stands, we have 50 LEA members. We'll be adding all 5 of the new charter LEAs that are opening this year. So we'll be expanding. We're really excited to welcome our new members. And our campuses serve approximately 5,000 students with disabilities. Our programming ranges very broadly. This program today falls under our Elevate program, which really tries to span the gamut from compliance to quality, with a focus on quality of services for students with disabilities. We also have a DC 3C program, which focuses on secondary transition. And lastly, our school-based Medicaid program that brings Medicaid reimbursement dollars back into schools to support their programming. Next slide, please. So today we're here to talk about our demonstration classrooms. This is a brand new project for us, one that we've actually been quietly working on for the past 2 years. If you're like me and have been in DC for a while, I think one of the common themes that always recurs is who's doing special education well. Everyone will ask, like, they just want to know who's doing a good job with it so that they can see what that looks like. And while there are all kinds of pockets of success, I started in DC when we were in class action lawsuits, when there was lots of compliance challenges. We've come a long way, and I think there are many, many bright lights throughout the charter sector especially. But what we really wanted to do is focus very, very narrowly on practices that really work for kids with disabilities, frankly, all children, but especially for kids with disabilities in driving positive academic and behavioral outcomes for them. We wanted to create these demonstration classrooms as a way of not only sharing those practices citywide, but creating a PD model for the LEA so that they could practice it on a small scale at the classroom level, and then make sure that it works within their context and their model, and then use it as a way to expand it to the grade level, to the school level, and do it in a way that is thoughtful, taking into account all of the infrastructure constraints and challenges, but then keeping, moving it forward to expand to reach more and more children within the LEA. Our intention pre-COVID was to invite you all into the school, because there's nothing like going into a classroom and doing an observation of teachers and children. It really just brings a practice to life in a way that, an article or a PowerPoint just doesn't do it. So that was our intention, and then the world shifted. So we still wanted to get this out there to folks because we believe so strongly in this practice and in the work that the teachers have done over the past year. We wanted to give them an opportunity to share what they've done, and also to share with other LEAs what we've learned in creating this kind of classroom. So today we'll be talking about our co-teaching model. We have our UDL model classroom scheduled, I believe it's for July 1st. And so stay tuned for that invitation. And then the evidence-based intervention will be later on in the summer. So with that, I will turn it over to Deborah Dantzler-Williams, the Executive Director of Inspired Teaching Demonstration Public Charter School. Thank you so much for being with us and for inviting us into your school to do this work.
Oh, good morning. And I want to start by saying thank you, a tremendous thank you to the Special Education Co-op. Our school was chartered in 2010 and we opened in 2011. And we did not have deep expertise in special education, though we were eager to be able to serve all students of the District of Columbia. And we knew that we needed to get prepared for what could happen. The Special Ed Co-op offered at that time workshops of all sorts, including a very deep dive into the requirements of special education. And I have to say, all of my knowledge of special education, all of the knowledge that went into the early years of our school came from the Special Ed Co-op. They partnered with us over several years, helping to build our expertise. And then we were very fortunate to find Samantha Lincoln, who is newly our Director of Student Servicing and Programming. And I can't say enough about the growth that a school can do when you have supporters, keen advocates like the Special Ed Co-op. Our school, as I mentioned, was founded in 2010. And at that point, our vision was for a collaborative teaching model because we believe that building on the expertise of multiple individuals is how you build the strongest program. And so Samantha Lincoln, by the time Samantha Lincoln joined us, we had grown from about 140 students to approaching 500. This coming school year will be our 10th year in existence. And among the things that happens in your 10th year in DC is that you have a charter review. And I am so pleased to be able to share that we have started our charter review for the 10th year. And one of the things that we were concerned about was how well are we truly doing our special education programming? Do we have that collaboration that we sought? Do we have that expertise that can spot where we fall down? Because occasionally you do fall down, and we try so hard to stay abreast of things. But thanks to the work of the Special Ed Co-op and Samantha Lincoln, we are well prepared, I was told and assured by OSSI. We are well prepared for our 10-year review, and I'm so excited that that is real growth on our part. And it's been done with intention. And thank you so much for visiting our school. I'll turn it over now to Samantha Lincoln.
Thank you so much, Debbie. You know, you can see I come with us from a school with a lot of partnership and a lot of humility. To build on what Debbie shared, I actually inherited Elevate at Inspired Teaching. It had been started, the partnership on this particular grant had been started by my predecessor, and in the transition, 2 of our principals actually took it over. And I think that's something that's really special about the way the co-op has approached this process, is that it outlasts any one particular person in an administration or in a school. When you build these really solid practices and build capacity, it's something that I know will be there for years to come. And again, that leadership team members are intensely involved in, continue to be involved in, and are able to take over and get other people and other stakeholders invested too. That kind of longevity, that kind of stamina is something that's really important when you're saying we're gonna put significant time and resources into building a new program. So one of the reasons that co-teaching was a part of our project with the Special Education Cooperative is that it does allow for greater implementation of a universal design for learning. So making sure that there are core practices in the classroom, and that's academically, social, emotionally, that all students can access, and having a second trained person in the classroom, a second equal partner, really allows us to disseminate that work. Expanding capacity for co-planning was really important. That actually allowed us to increase the services available to students with disabilities by more than 33% without having to add any staffing. So without adding a single extra position, we were able to add that amount of time onto the supports available to students, again, by just thinking and conceptualizing of inclusion support as equal partners that plan together, that incorporate IEP goals and student skills into general education curriculum goals and objectives, and then really tackle that as a team with a variety of methodologies. We had been stuck in one teach, one assist, or a special education teacher coming into the room and targeting one student at a time. And this has really allowed us to disperse that work, which also allowed us to increase the volume of work. And then engaging and supporting all students. You know, as you hear our wonderful partners, Melissa and Tamis, speak, you wouldn't walk into that room and think Miss V is the special educator and Mr. T is the gen ed, and never the two shall meet. You know, these kids belong to them and these kids belong to them. It really was just such a wonderful partnership, and that allowed the students to engage and support in a more meaningful way. But there was a level of equity there. There was a level of access there where our students with disabilities became so much more engaged in the classroom. And our general education students did too, because of the extra layers of support. So that was why we got into co-teaching, and I'm really excited for you guys to hear from our team about what that's looked like and what we've learned.
Okay, so moving on. Hi everyone, I'm Megan Alderton and I am the Program Quality Specialist for the co-op. So I'm gonna share a little bit with you about my role in all of this, and which really boils down to training and coaching. And so we worked pretty diligently to be purposeful about selecting who sort of the model classroom would be. And then my job was to train and coach them. And I'll start off with saying we actually started off with a whole school training, because we really thought it was important that, you know, if this is something that we were going to own, everybody needed to know that this was going to be happening. And so as sort of the practice spreads, it's not a surprise to everyone what's forthcoming. So I'm going to share sort of the premises of why co-teaching is important before we have the discussion with Tamis and Melissa. So, and I always feel, I'll start off with saying, I always feel weird explaining co-teaching, because it's just like, well, yeah, it's co-teaching. Why not, right? But I think, you know, the more we delve into it, the more that we see, you know, how important it is. And we also see enough to know that it's not necessarily easy to implement. And so it really requires training and support. So co-teaching is the practice of having more than one teacher provide instruction in the classroom. I think we know that. So, you know, why is it important? There's something about strength in numbers. And I like the visual here, because for me, co-teaching is about all of these things, right? Shared responsibility. You know, really competent classrooms are going to be very well co-taught. It's sort of the epitome of professionalism, because it's showing how important it is for you to work with your colleagues in order to make gains for kids. You get a variety of experiences, right? It is a service. In terms of special education, you know, it is an area of specialized instruction expertise. And another key thing is like the flexibility. Co-teaching allows for immense flexibility in the classroom, because you're increasing opportunities for flexible grouping, increasing opportunities for differentiation as well. So next slide, please. So here's some points just from the research. And this research comes from Ferguson and Distralis and Mayer from 2000. And this was actually pulled from the Center for Applied Science and Technology, which is a big proponent of universal design for learning. And these are just some key points about why you want to use co-teaching. There are immense strengths in the practice. You get more opportunities for one-on-one interaction with kids, which is also very important, especially when we're serving with the variety of students that we serve. Students with disabilities are getting access to the gen ed curriculum. This is something that is required by law. But you're using an inclusive classroom community and activities to facilitate that. You get students having opportunities for specialized instruction. You can benefit from the additional supports and resources from diversity in the classroom. I think the key thing is diversity in the classroom. And it's not just with the students, it's the diversity amongst the teachers, because you have two teachers coming from two separate backgrounds, maybe having two different styles, but all of that coming together nicely can really, and that's what we find, you just really get the richness of good instruction in the classroom. You also, I think, because of that, you can get stronger, more creative lessons, right? Because of the different, again, backgrounds of teachers, different types of thinking melding into one. So I think those are, pretty strong. And one thing that I always mention too, that I think people don't think about, is that camaraderie that you build with a colleague is an example to students of what, appropriate, strong relationships and good interaction looks like. So it's not just even an academic boost for kids, it's a social emotional boost as well, because the teachers are modeling what good relationships look like. So we can go to the next slide. So I think, even though it sounds like, yes, of course, there are a lot of challenges with co-teaching. And I think everybody probably has experienced this in some way. If you've ever tried to co-teach or if you've tried to implement co-teaching, it is one of the hardest things to do. And I think these three things here, I think, are the key reasons that we've, figured out. Probably the hardest part is building relationships, because personalities are a thing, right? And trying to get, two personalities, if you are co-teaching with someone who has a completely different personality than you do, that can be a struggle, because you're not just working on instruction, you're working on building a relationship. And so one of the things that I do talk about in training is, how do you build a relationship with another person? I always give the example, I co-taught probably with at least 6 different people in my career. I feel like I was fortunate enough where I only really had one that was a little shaky, but the best one was with my sister-in-law. And that shows you how a relationship is important. It was so easy to co-teach with her because we already had a foundation for a relationship. So, that just to me gives a good example of how it takes work, not only in the academic component of building, the work for the students, but building a relationship with the person you're co-teaching with. Also, I always harp on this, with school leaders, a lack of administrative support around co-teaching can absolutely be the downfall of co-teaching. So one of, my soapbox things is, if there's going to be co-teaching, it has to be supported in the infrastructure, which we'll talk about. Master schedule is a huge piece of this. And continued coaching and support for the teachers, even if it's like going to be, relationship management. It has to happen. I think one of the things that was really great about working at Inspired was we had an instructional coach, Mr. Frizzell, who participated with us. So, he was coaching those teachers regardless of the co-teaching, but he partnered with me to sort of make sure that when we were doing observations, we were looking for and supporting the same things. So that was very helpful. Next slide. All right, so the models. I think if you're familiar with co-teaching, you're pretty familiar with the models, but I will go over them. One teach, one assist and observe. This is the one that we see the most when we start to engage in the training and coaching process. This is the one that I'm pushing people away from. Simply because if you're constantly leaning on this one, then you're not maximizing the potential for really strong inclusive practices in the classroom. And I will definitely say when we started for Inspired Teaching, we actually, I find this to be even more of a success because we started with Mr. T and a different co-teacher who then she left. And so essentially it was 1 year of building a team and then getting Mr. T to start over with a new co-teacher. But I'm saying that to say that because we had pushed away from the one teach, one assist in that first year, it was so much easier to maintain the work and build from the work in the second year, even though we were essentially starting with a new team. So team teaching, I always say that's sort of the epitome of co-teaching when there's so much parity in the classroom. Alternative teaching, smaller groups where you can be doing actually different, you can be working on different types of skills. Station teaching, I think everybody has done stations, but we always talk about, the good thing when you have co-teachers doing stations is that you can have small group instruction going on with 2 groups and independent practice going on with another 2 groups. And that rotation making sure that every single student gets time for independent practice as well as time with a teacher. And finally, parallel teaching, which is, I always think of 2 parallel lines. I love the images that they use here because it really, shows you exactly physically what the classroom should look like. What's happening in parallel teaching we worked on is you're teaching the same content, but you might be approaching it in different ways based on either homogeneous grouping or heterogeneous grouping, however you decide it needs to happen for that particular content. So these are the models that we aim to be observing in the classroom every single time at some point during an observation. And I can definitely say with this group, we had an opportunity to actually see and get to every single one of these models during the instruction. So that in itself, I think is a huge accomplishment because usually what you'll find is teachers without the coaching and the training just sticking to ones that they're comfortable with. And this team got an opportunity to expand and focus on and think about working on ones that they hadn't thought about doing before or hadn't done before. So I thought that was a great success. Next slide. All right, so things that we want to see in co-taught classrooms that we really work on is parity among the classroom staff. So do both teachers appear to know what's expected in the flow of instruction? And I could definitely say in that classroom, when a lesson started, I could tell that both teachers knew as we got deeper and deeper into the school year, both teachers knew what the plan was. That is, parity of instruction is so highly dependent on, again, that infrastructure, master scheduling, because you also need to make sure that your teachers have co-planning time. It is almost, I say, unrealistic to expect teachers to have co-teaching success without built-in co-planning time and just time built in for them to work together. One of the things that I think is another essential push as you're dealing with co-teaching, you can actually co-teach and be implementing these models, but not differentiating instruction. And I think that's sort of a hard thing to wrap your head around because you feel like, well, you have 2 teachers in the room, like, yes, you should be differentiating, but it doesn't essentially happen. And so one of the things that I love about the tool that we use for observation was that you cannot get enough points for mastery without working on and making sure you're differentiating your instruction and using universal design for learning. And so that was an integral part of the process. Once we realized that, yes, we could get these co-teaching models down, we actually had to do some work around differentiation and designing universally designed instruction for the students. And so our work was really multifaceted. What I was really looking forward to, which I was disappointed we didn't get to because of the closure, I believe that one of the best ways to implement universal design for learning is implementing using assistive technology. And so one of the things that we were going to work on was having some of our partners who are assistive tech specialists come into the classroom and do some observing to see what types of assistive technology we could add into the classroom environment in order to expand UDL and differentiation. So we didn't quite get as far as we wanted to, but I think that's, you know, we're not done with you yet. So, so again, you'll absolutely see flexible grouping. We're always looking for that. And yeah, so, and I think just in regard to assistive tech, we're talking about both high-tech tools and low-tech tools. We were engaged in serious conversations about flexible seating, right? And, you know, Tamis and Melissa can speak more to this, but we, you know, I was always looking at, you know, do you think it would be good to have a section over here with bouncy ball chairs? You know, how are they using the computers? And we saw a lot of evolution in terms of how they were using the computers over time, so which was really cool. Next slide. All right, so in terms of the demonstration classroom, we kind of set up with, you know, these are the building blocks here. And the key things are infrastructure, training, and materials. So you can get a glimpse here on this slide of what all of that entailed, some of which I talked about a little bit. But essentially, first and foremost with infrastructure, we needed to adjust the master schedule. Like we had to make sure, and I always love when Samantha shares about how the difference that made, because thinking about the master schedule and including co-teaching in that process, they were able to add 33% more, right? Additional time was found to serve students with disabilities. That's a big deal because it's not necessarily always about hiring more people, right? It's not always about more people as opposed to the efficient use of staff. And, you know, so again, I'll say master schedule 100 times, but it's so important. The other thing that was really exciting, I worked with Wendy Lochner, who is a very close partner with Marilyn Friend. If everybody knows, Marilyn Friend is like the co-teaching guru of sorts. But the tool that we use for observation, they actually have a web-based version of it. And so I worked with Wendy Lochner to actually input the teacher's information into this system. We purchased this system to use. And what it's able to do is provide real-time feedback after observations. So I was able to go into the classroom, put it in observation, and immediately send it along to the teachers. And so they could see and monitor their progress. I could see and monitor their progress, and that facilitated the conversations that need to happen for coaching and implementation. So that was a key part of the infrastructure. Training, we calculated about 60 hours of training and coaching, and that's just monthly coaching and observation cycles. And that included the peer coaches in the process, which was very cool. Because I think it allowed us to expand our thinking and our ideas and have additional support implementing things in the classroom. And then finally, materials. We were actually, another sad thing we were working on, we were in the process of working on outfitting the classroom with a smart board, because we found with parallel teaching especially, and then some of, as they started to discover like how they could use technology better, that would have been a really useful way to expand and engage the students in the classroom. So again, we're not done with you yet. Hopefully we can figure that out. I don't know, you know, there's doors have to open and all that stuff, but we'll see. And then low tech tools. Block timers were one of the things that we started really working with, especially to manage the small groups, because there was a lot, because of the nature of inspired teaching and the type of cooperative work that's done with the kids. It was really essential to try to find tools to keep the kids on task without too much adult push or support. So we implemented using block timers, which was really successful and helpful. And next slide. All right, so at this time, I am going to introduce you to Mr. T and Mrs. V. I am very proud of their little avatars that I found. I'm just saying, Mr. T, I haven't heard from you, so I don't know if you like yours. But I think they're fair.
I think it's great. Thank you.
I think they're fairly representative of their joy and personalities. So just, I'll let you guys sort of take over, but I'll share your stats. Mr. T is the gen ed teacher in the classroom. He's got 5 years of experience in middle and high school. And Mrs. V has 15 years of experience. She's been in Loudoun County prior to coming to DC. She's a special education teacher. She's taught English for a long time, 9 through 12, and she's also done adult ed in English. Just to get a glimpse of where the students are in the classroom. So in this particular classroom, there were 20 students. 40% of the students had disabilities. There's 6 with IEPs, 2 with 504 plans, and 2 Ls. 7 boys and 13 girls. So it was definitely a very diverse classroom, and lots of personalities in that classroom too. So, you know, we had to work through, you know, how this was also going to support the kids social emotionally. And I think we did definitely see some changes over time as the students became more engaged with the improved co-teaching. So with that said, we can move to the next slide, and I'll pass it over to, or actually we won't move to the next slide. I would like for Mr. T and Mrs. V to share their experience.
Mr. T, did you want to start or?
Sure. So I'm sad the video is not working because I'm in the classroom right now.
Oh no.
So just picking up on the history and how this work has shifted my teaching and planning and instruction. In my high school experience, I'd never had a co-teacher, and sometimes would be teaching classes of 35, 36 students in 9th grade with varying, I did have some students with IEPs, but I was not the primary, why am I drawing the blank? Inclusion classroom. And so then coming to ITDS really shifted and helped me start to be more intentional about what different students need in order to access the curriculum. The biggest shift I would say is that I came from a teaching prep program that was really about student choice and using the writing workshop model of show a strategy and then let students go run with that strategy and practice it on their own. And the idea is that you can then go work with students individually once they have the strategy and are working on their own. And we did that a lot. But my first year here, I realized my approach with that meant that everyone gets the lesson and everybody understands what I've said and then can go do it on their own without really thinking about differentiation or just really saying, okay, we'll work with that kid individually. But then you wind up running around and not giving everyone the attention that they need. And some people start falling through the cracks. And so then this shift was more towards, okay, now we have 2 people in the room. Let's be intentional about who's working with who. Let's be intentional about what instructional tools this student needs in order to start building that independence and things of that nature. Just an example that I think we really got to and moved away from the one teach, one assist is that during interview day for a research paper that the students were doing, Ms. V and I planned out, okay, who are you going to interview? We got multiple students up to do interviews in front of the classroom. I interviewed them and wrote ideas down. Then Ms. V jumped in and interviewed and demonstrated how to use speech to text on a computer so that students could capture each other's interviews in the easiest way possible so that they could focus on the work and accomplish that and not get hung up on how much do I type or, you know, what if I can't capture everything my partner says. So yeah, that I feel like is exemplary of the coaching and the guidance that we receive to help work towards that and make sure that students have everything that they need in order to do the best work that they can.
And just to go back to, thanks, Mr. T. And some of the things we did too in class is we were really good about dividing up the class of like, Mr. T might be like, I'm going to take this group. And there could be kids with IEPs in that group because that group was really understanding the lesson or they were ahead in their reading if we were working on a novel. And then I would take another group and we would kind of go back and forth where maybe I read a page and then we talk about the questions that are written out for the day and then go back and forth to help get the kids caught up and help them understand with when we're doing things, when we were writing, we did the same thing. And some students would prefer to cling to Mr. T and some students would prefer to cling to me. And it was a combination of general ed students in those ELL, IEP, 504 kids. So it wasn't like I just had IEP kids and Tamis just had like the brightest kids in the room. We kind of had a combination of everyone to help them. And so that also helped, I think, build comfort in the classroom. And one of the coolest projects we did, I wish I could take credit for it, but was actually someone that Mr. T was helping mentoring, was that storyboard project where they did the graphic novels. What was that, Tamis? What was the
Story Jumper.
Oh, Story Jumper. Yeah, that was really cool. And that was one of the funnest projects to do and to work with kids and to break up in groups and see their ideas, just because it was so interactive and every single kid was like super into it. And it was just like the class was so full of life. And, you know, that like, I feel like we did a lot of work going back and forth, like, okay, let's try to do this video. Let's break up this group like this. Like if Tamis made a graphic organizer, he'd be like, what do you think? Or I'd make a graphic organizer, and we'd go back and forth. And even if we didn't have a lot of planning time together, because I had a pretty packed schedule, Tamis always made it a point, like, hey, can you meet at lunch today? Can we talk? Okay, let's go over, the lesson. And so I always knew exactly what to expect, and we knew who we were gonna break up when we went into the classroom. And I think that was really helpful. And we had very few like discipline problems or anything in that classroom. I just think because there was a big buy-in by the students, and I think that they felt supported, even though sometimes middle schoolers may not act that way. I think they knew that, we cared and were there to help them. And I think that was what was so powerful about the classroom, is that we were always able to break them up and offer support. And if students did speak out negatively, we backed each other up, like, hey, we don't talk like that. This isn't how we do it. This is the way we are. Look at us. Look at how we act. This is how we get along. So I just thought it was a really awesome experience. And I thought that class really, I don't know, I just thought that, like, with the help of SPED Co-op, I think like we both learned a lot, and we were able to go to Bridges and observe some a pretty unique classroom, doing a math lesson. And I think that everything that SPED Co-op offered us just not only gave us a lot of support, but gave us a lot of like good ideas, and made us so that we tried to be very intentional with everything that we did in the classroom, and use the time to best help the kids.
You're still muted, Megan.
I'm sorry. If I could ask you guys, because I think you definitely got to that point, but I think I noticed change in the students and how they function in the classroom. Did you notice like the students grow and change and respond to that shift as well?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of kids became more independent of their work. Some kids didn't want help, or they would just do more of a check-in with things. But if they didn't feel as confident with like their reading, then they would ask questions. It's funny because I feel like students in that class were more confident with their writing, but they probably need more help with their writing, but they felt more confident with it. So they were less likely to ask help and be more independent. And then you'd be like, wait a minute, how did I miss you? You don't have enough stuff. Like, let's go through this together. Now we need to sit down. Did you notice anything, Tamis? Oh.
Yeah, I think the big thing that the co-teaching coaching helped was working towards looking at collaboration and purposeful groupings, so that, like you said, Ms. V, the graphic novel project worked really well because students were able to choose partners, and then that allowed us to work with partners, with partnerships, and be able to, like, I think that they inherently started engaging more, and then that allowed us to reach more students and give everyone more frequent feedback and things of that nature.
Cool. Well, thank you guys. I have to say, like, it was definitely fun working with you, and I was really bummed because, we started to get further to do more things, and we kind of were disrupted, but it's not the end. I don't think you'll see the last of me or hear the last of me. And, I like that one thing that you brought up, Mr. T, that I think really shows the whole purpose of the demo classrooms is, as we were developing others, when we really started working on differentiation in UDL, I was able to take them to a UDL classroom that we were building, which we'll hear about in a couple of weeks, just to be able to just look at examples of strategies that they could, use in their classroom. And I can tell you that we went one day, over to that UDL classroom, the next day I visited their co-teaching classroom and they were immediately implementing strategies that they saw. And that was just like, if anything is going to melt my heart, it's that, because they were, the whole time they were there, they were asking those teachers questions. You know, they were saying, oh, wow, how did you do this? Why do you do that? And then they were thinking about and talking to each other like, hey, we can do this as well. And when they implemented those things, I immediately saw the difference that it made in the classroom, just even in how the students were responding. So, you know, that's the whole purpose of the demonstration classroom. And, you know, you guys were great, always cooperative. So I really appreciate it. And there's always more to learn and, you know, areas to grow, but you guys are on your way.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So I'll turn it over for Samantha just to discuss, because, you know, we had the school closure. And so just to talk a little bit about like, how did that impact the plans, but where you guys see yourselves moving to with co-teaching in the future would be great to hear about.
Sure. Yeah, so we, with our model and in consultation with our team and with our families, our model was a blended model where there was some live instruction, but the majority of our instruction was asynchronous. We used Google Classroom and a number of other platforms. So all the co-taught classes were co-administered during the closure. So Ms. V was a co-teacher on her classes in Google Classroom. I took on co-teaching responsibilities in 6th grade and co-taught those classrooms. And it was a really wonderful experience. It takes a lot of communication, and we have learned so much. And going into next year, we now know that if there's a component of our model that is distance, which we imagine there will be to some extent, we know what works. And so I know as a 6th grade co-teacher, I was getting all of my general education teachers' lessons at least a week in advance. I could go in and modify, and especially with the Google Classroom platform, I could be directly in students' documents. Or later we evolved to like, oh, did you realize you can assign certain things to only certain kids? And so we might have 3 or 4 different working versions of an assignment with different levels of scaffolds and be able to assign that to the appropriate students. And then using our live instructional time, all of our special educators did live one-to-one instruction, that we would use that time to support students in accessing the general education curriculum while also working on their IEP goals and implementing IEPs to the extent possible. So the communication that we built and the collaboration we built as co-teachers during the school year carried over into the closure. People were able to communicate, they knew how to reach each other, they knew each other's working styles because of the fact that we had spent so much effort on that this year. And I have to say that even though we're talking about one demo classroom and special education co-teaching specifically, because Megan did come and train our entire staff, this is a model that you could see with our teachers and residents, with our teachers and teaching assistants, that you might have a Zoom breakout group or, you know, a teaching assistant who's doing hundreds, tens, and ones chart, and the general education teacher is doing this other component of the lesson. So it's really well infused right now, and I do think we carried that over to closure to the greatest extent possible. In school year 2021, this is a change we're really excited about. One thing we did this year in just learning and growing is all of our special education teachers co-taught classes, and they also did pull-out research-based interventions. So all of our teachers were trained in Lindemood, Bell, Touch Math, or both, and they were trying to straddle both of those roles. And through our learning experience and analyzing our data this year and getting feedback from our teachers and families, our teachers next year, our grade band teachers, are going to be inclusion teachers. That's their primary and predominant job. And research-based interventions will be handled by one member of the team. And so that's really exciting that now all of their time gets to go into building these relationships, building the fluency with the content, building the different models and the implementation. It's interesting that this ended up as our demo class because Ms. V and Mr. T were the only co-teaching team that did not have co-planning time. All other teams in our schedule had co-planning time, and that was just a slight variation with our middle school schedule. And so that's another change we've made for next year, is that the schedule preschool 3 to 8, which is a hard thing to do to get a master schedule for preschool 3 to 8, all teams will have co-planning time as well. So we're really excited about being able to do this work more robustly, and to make sure that teachers have the time and the support that they need. And that's their main focus, is how do I support access in this classroom, instead of having to split that between how do I support access and community in this classroom and also do these really intensive interventions as well. So we're open to any questions. You have lots of us here to help answer them. And I don't know, maybe Megan, you've been monitoring the chat, and we'll try to answer them to the best of our ability.
Yeah, so this is sort of the portion where we wanted to have Q&A. So you can actually, I guess, and Monica, I don't know if you want to chime in, but we can do it 2 ways. If attendees want to raise their hands to ask a question.
Well, yeah, if you guys can raise your hands, or the Q&A box. I see the two that are in there. Kenyatta had a great question around the hours on the IEP. You know, each school has their own philosophy, and I always recommend people consult with their school's council. Based on our model, we chose to only put hours on the IEP that the special educator is in the classroom. So we don't count co-planning time and general education differentiation as specialized instruction inside general ed. So if one of Miss V's students had 10 hours, for example, Miss V was in their classrooms co-teaching 10 hours a week. As far as the sample schedule, we can try to pull something together from this past year. Our schedule process, when Megan says, like, we'll say master schedule a million times, it's, to be honest, one of my favorite experiences at Inspired, because it is this massive collaborative endeavor. Our early childhood curriculum specialist made this gorgeous chart on her wall like 3 days before the shutdown, and I felt so bad she had to transfer it all to, you know, a Google Sheet. But it involves principals, instructional coaches. Debbie comes and sits down with us, our registrar, and our LAA data manager, and we workshop it in this way. But the foundations became specials, because again, we're trying to share specials between 3-year-olds up to 8th grade and lunch and recess and things like that. But intervention enrichment, that block in our day, that became the anchor. We had to make sure that each grade band had an intervention block that did not overlap, because last year we had one interventionist, and then again, our SPED teachers are split across multiple grades. So it looks like kind of this cascading tier where every grade has devoted intervention time. And then similarly, again, going back to Mr. Frizzell, he worked some magic with making sure that the math and reading of the shared grade bands would not overlap. So for example, Miss V could be in every math class every day for 7th grade and for 8th grade. And she could be in every English class every day for 7th grade and for 8th grade. So I think we can probably get you guys a blank schedule and that somehow parses out our process. But again, I just have to say, it's not a one-person endeavor where like a SPED director is sitting in a room trying to make it work. It takes so many people and so much dedication. And like I said, it's one of the processes I enjoy the most every year.
Thank you. Were there any other questions? I saw a big bulk of the questions were about, you know, the scheduling and examples.
Megan, there's a question in the Q&A. How did you involve families in understanding the co-teaching model, especially families of learners with disabilities?
This is a great question. Inspired is a very community-based and community-oriented school. So one thing that that leadership and I did last year that we didn't get to do this year because it was Miss Douglas, one of our leaders, was trying to get it together right before the closure, but we did a family forum for students with disabilities where families actually came in. It was a great collaborative opportunity for them to meet and speak with each other as well and share resources. And that's where we explain not only co-teaching and our models and why we do what we do and how we do it and how it looks, but also our interventions too, and explaining to families like what's the difference between seeing stars versus visualizing and verbalizing? Why does my kid have 3.75 hours instead of an even number? So some of that took place in one full forum, and then some of those are more direct conversations. But again, wanting families to be clear on it, because I think we probably, maybe in the very beginning, Miss V had some families that were like, why is Miss V calling me? Of maybe a general education student or something, you know? And so we definitely had to then follow up and explain to families, nope, these are equal partners in the classroom. So if Miss V has an interaction or a win or anything with a general education student, she's going to be making that call, you know? So I think it did take some kind of tweaks and clarification along the line. But even if when you went to our website, we have a great development team. When you went to our website, like the classroom was listed in Edlio as Mr. T and Miss V. So it was always very clear that these were shared classrooms.
Samantha, there's another question in the chat. Any changes to your schedule or model once schools reopen and need to align to CDC guidelines for social distancing?
I mean,
I will,
yeah, I'll leave that to Debbie if she has any answers. As far as I know, we're still in the mode of we don't know, and we're working with a number of different models and following things closely. The only thing I can add from this SPED lens is that, especially based on how much we learned this year, whether we are in person or we are distanced or we are a mix of the two, co-teaching will remain an integral part of our practice, as will our interventions, which virtually are going really, really well.
The District of Columbia has had really noteworthy collaboration between the sectors. So school leaders are meeting with the Deputy Mayor for Education on a regular basis. We are meeting with the Executive Director of the Public Charter School Board on a regular basis. And many of us as school leaders have come together in smaller groupings of like 12 to 15 school leaders chatting about what we're doing. We're working hard to adhere to the guidance that Reopen DC shared, and the Reopen DC group was a en masse collaboration between experts across the health spectrum and the education spectrum, working together to talk about what should be our baseline in terms of the schedules, in terms of how many kids we would have in school at one time. The District of Columbia has started with the basic guideline of 10 people to any space. And it doesn't matter the size of the space. So 10 people to any space means that at most we may be able to have 7 or 8 students because of the multiple adults we will have in the room. We see it as important to continue to have multiple adults in the room because of the benefits we've seen to kids, because of the way that more kids have been able to receive direct instruction that is of benefit to their learning profile. You really can't take that away once you've discovered how well that works for students. And we also hear from the teachers how well it works for them to be able to share ideas, bounce ideas off of one another, and use their collective expertise rather than the constraints. You know, as educators, we don't like to highlight that we actually have areas where we are less strong. But in fact, when you take into consideration the circumstance of individual students, having multiple adults makes it so much more likely that every student will be able to build a strong relationship in their classroom. So we wouldn't dream of changing it. As to how we are going to make sure that it happens, it starts with me saying this is definitely going to happen, and then I have Samantha's expertise, the principals, the interventionists, as well as our instructional coaches to help with the implementation. But it starts with making a firm decision that it is going to be at the foundation of the work you do. So I have found that to be the helpful first start. And then because our teachers are so committed to it, having seen the benefit of it, it makes it more likely that it's going to flow easily. And when it doesn't flow easily, instructional leaders, including myself, get in there to ensure that it happens.
Thank you so much, team. As we are wrapping up, we just wanted to share our next steps with participants. Our goal at the co-op is to continue the relationship with all of our demo sites to make sure that they have the support that they need to expand within their school. We also want to keep looking for other schools that are interested in building their own demo classroom. Again, as I mentioned at the beginning, we think this is a really powerful professional development model for schools. The one and done PD, it just doesn't work for stickiness. And so we need models within our buildings that teachers can go to and observe and emulate. So we'll be looking out for new partners to build classrooms. And then we're also going to be sharing, as we've mentioned a couple times, our UDL classroom over at Bridges. I had the chance to observe that one before closure, and it was just beautiful. It was so inspiring to see what can happen when teachers and leaders buy into a practice that benefits all children, and then they get the support they need to make it happen. So I encourage you all to be with us on the 1st to see that classroom. And then as always, if you have questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Thank you all for all of your questions in the chat. I was definitely taking notes about some supplemental materials that we'll try to put together and share with the group. We stood up a page on our website that will be where our demo classroom materials live, so you can always find it there as soon as we post it. And again, thank you so much for being with us. Thank you, Inspired Teaching team. It was, this was a great session. It was so wonderful to hear from you all, and we will be in touch with everyone soon. Have a good rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, ITDS team.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, co-op.
Thank you, guys.
Have a good day, y'all.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you, Julie.
Oh, thank you. That was really wonderful.
And thank you, Megan.
Thank you, Debbie.
Next year is year 10, and it's with your lift that we are going into it so confidently. So I can't thank you enough.
Oh, you're too sweet.
Speaking truth here. Thank you. Have a good rest of your day.
You too.
It was good to see you.
Bye.